What's up, guys? Somebody wanted me to do a video about the 30 round magazine, and I looked through all my videos and I hadn't done one, so that's what we're going to do today. In particular, we're going to go over like some of the common problems with them, and their strong points and weak points. So here we go. All right, this plastic piece, you can just pull this off. And if you do get an air adapter for one of these, all of these pins have to be knocked out with a punch. And then you just put your tube in there with the nut on it and tighten it down. Butt it up against that seal and you're good to go. Now, your most common problem is the valve seal. And that sits, the front valve seal that is, that sits somewhere in here. And to get to it, we have to take off the valve seat. And you see here we've got these grooves for a flathead screwdriver. Now you can do this with a wide flat head screwdriver and just press down on the valve pin to get it open. But what I've done is I've just gone ahead and cut a groove in a wide flat blade screwdriver to make it easier for myself. Now this is your valve seat. This is your valve. And the way this works is you've got air in here and it's being, well, let me get the other seal out to show you. Okay. Now your spring goes on here like that. Let's just pretend our spring is on there. And then your spring presses on this metal washer that presses on this seal. So when it's pressurized, you've got pressure around here. And when your solenoid strikes the valve, it moves it like that, and then gas is allowed to come in the back of it and out the front. So this is your front valve seal, and this is what generally gives people problems. A way you can tell where your magazine is leaking is just have the whole thing completely together and charge it up with either CO2 or air and then put it down in water. If it's leaking out of this front part, it's going to be this seal right here. If it's leaking around here, around the edge, it's going to be this O-ring right here. And if it's leaking around the pin coming out of there, it's going to be the actual valve seat. Now, the valve seats don't generally wear out, but what can happen is when you change your valve, like let's say you want to move to a high performance valve, and you do, well, the crown of it is going to have a different profile than your stock valve, and your stock valve has already made its impression on that valve seat seal. You see that seal right there? So a lot of times when you change your valve, they're not going to want to fit. Now when you've got it completely apart, what you can do is get a cordless drill or chuck it in a vise and put your valve in there. And you can use like say maybe some real fine emery cloth and go over that, and then like a rubbing compound to get a mirror finish. That'll help preserve your front valve seal. And you can also do the same to the stem, and well, the pin rather, and that just prevents friction when it moves in and out of the seat, because these are turned on a lathe, and often you'll have machine marks going around it, and you can feel it grab in there if you haven't cleaned it up, or if it's got, you know, a subpar finish on it from the factory already. I do have new valve seats and high performance valves, and got 3 different types of valve seals. I don't really know a ton about O-rings, but the front seal, it's a size 007, and the one that the factory uses, this type, is a cast urethane seal, and so far I found them in 4 different types of material. This one's cast urethane. They make one in a red urethane, and you'll see like a number at the end of O-ring designations, like 90 or something like that. That is a measure of the abrasion resistance. And then you get to looking at materials like Viton. I can't remember exactly what, I think it's a 90, which is on the higher end of the abrasion resistance. But then you got to look at your material, the thermal properties of your material. So you can have like a Viton seal. It's got very good abrasion resistance qualities, but it doesn't have very good qualities under low temperatures. And a long time I thought that it got really cold in the valve body when you're firing the gun real heavy. And what happened was I have a BB centering done by Drozd, and some of his early stuff, what he was actually doing was in the set screw that he would put down in there. Before he would do that, he would drill the set screw, press a magnet into the set screw, so it had a little magnet inside there. And one day I noticed it had lost all of its magnetism, and then that told me that it gets hot in here, it doesn't get cold, because like above 170 degrees Fahrenheit, those neodymium magnets, they'll lose their magnetism. So I haven't had any problem with the Viton seals as far as, you know, low temperatures or anything like that. And that's what I plan. I had a phone call there. Anyway, the Viton seal is what I plan on using to do the test, to see if you could store one of these, you know, charged for long periods of time, because it will not work with the cast urethane seals. Other than that, the cast urethane seals work absolutely wonderful. Back in the day, you'll see some, if you can even still look up in the archives on the old BB machine gun owners group forum, you'll see a lot of talk about milled gum. And the thought was, somebody's on there talking about that the original seals are milled gum. I found some, and I do not believe that is true. Maybe some of the very first ones, but I actually did find some milled gum seals. and they were terrible, absolutely terrible. All right, anyway, so we can have a failure with our front valve seal and our valve seat seal, and then this O-ring around here. Now, you can get this expansion chamber usually come off with putting needle nose vice grips on the neck of it, just cracking it open. Fortunately, this one is already loose. And then you have another O-ring right here, and that just slides up onto that flat surface, which reminds me of something that I run into quite frequently with blackbirds when they have adapters already screwed into them. I'd say 9 times out of 10, what happens is they develop a leak, and then whoever owns them just keeps tightening down on those adapters to the point that they're just locked in there. And there's no sense in that. When you get a leak in your Blackbird magazine, there's an O-ring in there that butts up. Let me see if I can find something to show you. Oh, yeah, there's one right here. Okay. Hopefully I can get this one off. No. See, that's pretty typical of how they come in. Let me see if I can find something to show you. Okay, this is pretty typical how they come in with telephone tape on them and all that. Now this flat surface right here, if you can see down in there, there's an O-ring right in there, and that O-ring will start to leak. And people think, well, I just need to tighten it down more, and that will work for a little while. But then over time, it gets even worse, and the O-ring starts leaking more. And then they'll try to tighten it down more, and then it won't work. And then they'll take this out and put Teflon tape on it and stick it back together. When actually all they need to do is replace this O-ring and just have it hand tight. Okay, now if you're using CO2, there is a similar O-ring in here that works the same way, and it is right in there. I don't know what size that is. I don't ever shoot CO2, but when I need an O-ring for something like this, I've got one of these assortments that I got from an auto parts store. It's a little red box, got all different kinds of O-rings in it, and I'll just see what fits in there. A lot of times with O-rings, you don't have to get it spot on. If it's, close, it'll work. I know that's, if somebody knows the proper sizes of these O-rings, please put it down in the comments. And there's also, I'm not going to completely take this apart, but there's also another seal on this. And I can't remember how this comes apart, but I believe that there's a filter behind that you can take out and get a little more flow, but it's CO2. It's not really going to do you any good if you run CO2, because CO2 is only going to give you a maximum pressure of about 1,000 psi on a good day, and then as it's being released, it's going to drop drastically as it cools down. So, yeah, that's about it. let me show you one more time on how this goes back together. It goes, here's your valve body. Okay. Yeah, this surface is hard to see stuff on. Okay. All right, so valve body, your valve, front valve seal, this washer. It doesn't really matter which way you flip that washer. You'll notice it's a piece of stamped metal. I usually have it with the curved sides. That way it makes the valve a little bit easier to put through. And then your valve goes in. Oh, sorry. Spring, valve, and seat. One more thing about the O-rings. When I put these back together, I will put a drop of silicone oil down in there, and then I'll put my front valve seal in, and then I'll use like a toothpick, put the washer in, and then I just put the silicone oil in there to make sure it coats the front valve seal completely. And then this goes in like that. Rubber O-rings, whenever I need to replace one or can get to them, I'll put silicone grease on them because I have a sneaky suspicion that CO2 and just pressurized air tends to really dry out rubber. So if you can keep the rubber from contact with that expansion and compression of air, and you're a lot better off. You might even want to coat your rubber in like a silicone oil first and then some grease. If you just use the silicone oil, it's not going to stay on there a long time. And lubricating your BBs with silicone oil is also important, especially with the Blackbird magazine. One thing that a couple of good things about the 30 round magazine, they're very reliable. You can shoot crappy BBs with them. And if you want to hunt with them, you know, they're a lot quieter and you're generally not going to have a lot of opportunities to shoot. So you don't really need a huge capacity. Yeah, these things, when you put them back together, I know it looked really easy, and it was that time, but they can be maddening, lining up that valve to get it through that hole. But going back to the benefits of a 30 round magazine, when I was trying to get to 4K, I did it first with a 30 round magazine because I knew that it was going to be extremely difficult to do it with a Blackbird magazine right out of the gate. And the way I did that was I found that the factory spring would not feed it fast enough. So I went on this adventure and wound up making my own springs. Let me see if I've got one of those around here to show you. And here's one that still don't have the ends trimmed off of it, but these springs are made of these are a thicker wire, and because they're a thicker wire, you can't get quite as many BBs in them, maybe 25 BBs or so, but they're great for shooting, you know, extreme rates of fire because these other springs will not work. It's just too fast, and you've also got air pushing down on the BBs when you're trying to get them out of there. Yeah, so that's about it for that. If you've got a 30 round magazine, and just letting you know, they do have their the very useful, actually. And I do have the stiffer springs. And if you don't want to do the work yourself on finding the valve seals, I do have them for sale also. But that is about it for the 30 round magazine. And I hope that this answered your question and we can get you going. All right, that's about it for this.